Joining us right now to talk about it is Tennessee Congressman Chuck Fleischmann. Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Maria.
So the president has reportedly backed off on this border fight until after the midterms, but he has said, leading up to it, that if there's not the funding in the next budget, the government shuts down.
Well, I think the president's taken the right approach. Obviously, he's very reasonable. He understands the dynamics at work. I serve on the House Appropriations Committee. We put up $5 billion for the wall, and we've actually passed that bill in the House subcommittee. So that's very important. The president is wise. He understands what's at stake in the midterms. The House is in great shape. The Senate is the difficult part on the wall.
Well, that's the thing. You don't know if it's going to, even if you pass something in the House, then it goes to the Senate. Yeah. Give us the sense of timing. When are you expecting in terms of the appropriations for the next budget? The 30th is the deadline.
30th is the deadline. We've passed 6 appropriation bills. I'm actually a conferee for the House with 3 of those bills. Well, I think this will happen. Ultimately, we will make a decision very early September. Will the House and Senate be able to put something on the president's desk? If we're not able to do that, my gut feeling is possibly a short-term CR until after the elections. I think the most important thing we want to avoid right now is a government shutdown.
Sure.
Absolutely. And what do you think the probability of that happening is?
Very low.
Right before the midterms, by the way.
Very low. I think Senator Schumer's shutdown earlier this year was like touching a hot stove for him. It was really something that he realized very quickly the American people didn't want, even members of his own party didn't want. And right now, the economy's going so well, a shutdown would be the worst thing I think we could do.
You mentioned being concerned about the Senate and funding for the wall. Who are the Republicans in the Senate who you think need to get on board with the Republicans in the House?
I don't think it's a Republican problem. I think it's more of a Democratic problem. For some reason, the Democrats now, and really earlier in the year, they were actually more favorable towards talking about a wall compromise. It's the Democratic Party that has really thrown up these roadblocks. The Democrats in the House, actually in the House appropriations process, were fighting us on the wall, and I found that to be a little bit disheartening because I thought we had an opportunity to really do something larger with the wall in the package, and I still do. Ultimately, I think the American people want it.
But the Democrats aren't going to give the president anything that looks like a win. Even the beginning of a W, they're not going to give it to him, period. You have to know that.
Well, I know it, and I think the American people know it. I don't think the Democrats are really fully cognizant of that. And I think that's the peril in the midterms. We're looking so much better in our polling in the midterms. Our leader, McCarthy, gives us updates almost on a weekly basis. And the American people really, they want to keep ICE. They want the wall. They want the economy to go forward. So at some point in time, hopefully the Democrats will wake up, come to the table, and cut a deal that works for the American people.
So are you expecting the midterms, you keep the majority in the House, and Kevin McCarthy becomes the Speaker?
I think so. Right now, that's the way things are looking. I think we definitely keep the majority in the House. It's going to be close. We've got the map in certain places looks better than others, let's face it. Pennsylvania was redistricted. That's always a challenge. We've got some very good candidates, men and women, running all across the United States. The Northeast
is trade going to be an issue? Because we're talking about NAFTA and the potential for a deal with Mexico. The U.S. and Mexico apparently close to a deal. What can you tell us about that? Because Canada seems to be not poised to do a deal. Are you just waiting on Mexico, or is this something between Mexico and Canada for a new NAFTA?
I think if you look at trade, it is a very important factor overall in the economy. If you look at a state like mine in Tennessee, where free trade has been very good for agriculture, very good for commerce and manufacturing, that's an issue there. But the president is super strong in Tennessee. Republicans, it's a solid red state. We're going to do well there. But looking at it from, for example, the EU situation, where we talk about ultimately getting them to the table and removing all tariffs, the president's done a remarkable job in terms of negotiating with countries and regions. I think we're going to have to take trade on a region-by-region, country-by-country process. It's not going to happen in a day. Will we have some successes? Yes. And will we have some failures? Sure, I think so.
Well, you're hearing from any of your constituents, though, that they're worried about the administration's process to getting these countries to the table in the form of tariffs. And I'm not even talking about the back and forth between the U.S. and China, but the steel and aluminum tariffs, because that's what Canada is chafing at. I had to self-edit there real quick, sure. But that's what. But are you hearing from your constituents about these tariffs hurting their businesses?
Yes. By the way, I love a good euphemism. I live in that world. Yes. Let me say this. There are some constituents who are concerned about it. Clearly, I think tariffs are not the way to go, but there are other tools in our arsenal. But it's been a country-by-country process. Who would have thought that the relationship with the EU, those negotiations could have gone as well as they did? That's great. When we look at Mexico, we have Jack Daniels in Tennessee. That 25% tariff on liquor is a concern to them, obviously, but it's a process. Ultimately, I think we have the best negotiator in the world in Donald Trump at the table. So when he's sitting down with these countries, with these regions, and China still is the big problem.
So if Republicans maintain control in the House, and I think you were saying that there's a chance maybe even pick up some seats in the Senate, does that make it easier for Democrats after the midterm elections to compromise on the president's agenda, or do they become more entrenched?
I think they're going to have to compromise. I think this referendum, let's face it, my dad was an Eisenhower Republican, my mother was a New Deal Democrat. And when I got the values that I got from my mother and father, it was love of country. It was respect for police officers. My mother passed in 1977 of cancer. She would be shocked at the Democratic Party of today. So I think the American people, the electorate, will get it right. I've always trusted the people. And if one party goes too far in one direction or off the charts, and unfortunately I think the Democrats have on a lot of issues, they will come back because the electorate will make them come back.
Yeah, America's never that great, according to Andrew Cuomo.
Right.
That's the quote of the year for the Democrats.
He tried to walk that back, too, because it was an obvious, huge mistake right as soon as he said it. Yeah. Schumer and Feinstein are going to meet with the Supreme Court nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh. That's got to be one of your big priorities going into the midterms, right?
I'm excited. Of course, I serve in the House, and as a constitutionalist, I don't have a vote. That's a Senate vote. But I'm really excited about Kavanaugh. He's a great jurist. In 2006, he was basically overwhelmingly approved by the Senate, and now he's got the credentials as a great jurist. Yeah. So I think we've got a track record. I think we need to get him appointed to the court. I think he will win that vote because I think there's too many red state Democrats who don't want to vote no.
You know, for a long time, Andrew Cuomo was trying to be this, he wanted to make people think he was a moderate. Do you think that a moderate viewpoint just can't exist in the Democratic Party? So he goes all the way to the left and says America was never great?
That was played on a loop last week. It looked like that he was trying to make a bad joke, maybe, and he said that. But again, it's a page from President Obama's playbook. You didn't build that.
That's right.
Again,
exactly. But I mean, my point is, it's like this party, the Democrats, have been hijacked by the extreme left. You can't have a moderate viewpoint and actually have success in the party.
Unfortunately, you're right. I never thought I would see some of the rhetoric and some of the policies when I've seen what Elizabeth Warren is proposing for corporate America. It's shocking. And I think that's where, again, the American people will come back. Let's face it, so many Democrats voted for President Trump. I was really stunned in the last election. I was there on election night when we saw states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, blue-collar workers, blue-collar Democrats who voted for Ronald Reagan came back home to the Republican Party because of Donald Trump. They didn't do it because of anything else. They did it because he basically said, look, let's work on what's good for America and good basic policies. When you look at good fiscal policy, economic policy, foreign policy that makes sense, that's going to bring people back to any party. The Democrats, unfortunately, have lost their way on that, and they seem to continue to devolve further left. That's not good for the party, and it's not good for them, and the American people are going to correct it.
Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Great to be with you.
We appreciate you joining us. Chuck Fleischmann joining us there.